The bridge didn't just crack, it screamed. At 8:17 a.m., during rush hour traffic, a deep, violent sound split through the morning air like thunder tearing open the sky. Cars screeched, horns blared, concrete dust exploded upward in a gray cloud, and in the middle of it all stood Karen, phone in hand, screaming at a cement truck driver while the bridge beneath them literally began to collapse. What happened next would lead to arrests, lawsuits, and a shocking truth no one saw coming. The Riverside Bridge had stood for 43 years, connecting two busy parts of town. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't historic, but it carried thousands of lives across the river every single day. That morning, traffic was unusually heavy because of construction on the highway. Tempers were already short. Karen had been stuck behind a slow-moving cement truck for nearly 15 minutes before reaching the bridge entrance. Witnesses later said she was honking constantly, recording, yelling out her window. "You're destroying the road," she shouted. "You people never follow the rules." The driver, a quiet middle-aged man named Daniel Ruiz, kept both hands on the wheel. Company policy was strict. No confrontation, no engagement. Just drive. But Karen wasn't finished. Halfway across the bridge, she swerved her SUV into the emergency lane and cut in front of the cement truck, slamming on her brakes. Traffic jolted behind them. The heavy truck was forced to stop abruptly, its full load shifting violently forward. That's when it happened. A sharp cracking sound rippled beneath the concrete. Daniel felt it first, a vibration through the steering column. Then a second crack, louder, deeper, like something underneath had given way. Drivers began reversing in panic. Some abandoned their vehicles entirely. Karen, still filming, turned her camera toward the truck. "See, this overweight truck is damaging public property," she yelled. But she was wrong. The bridge hadn't failed because of the truck alone. And it certainly hadn't failed because of weight limits. It failed because of sudden force. When emergency crews arrived minutes later, a section of the bridge deck had fractured, exposing rebar and creating a dangerous sag in the structure. Authorities immediately shut it down. By noon, news helicopters circled overhead. By evening, footage of Karen screaming at the driver was everywhere online. And by midnight, police made 2 unexpected arrests. But the biggest shock wasn't that the bridge was damaged. It was who investigators decided was responsible. By the time the sun set, Riverside Bridge looked like a crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across both entrances. Police cruisers blocked traffic for miles. News vans lined the streets. The cracked section of concrete sat under floodlights, investigators walking carefully across the unstable surface. At 7:42 p.m., officers approached Karen's home. She was still live streaming. "I'm the victim here," she told her followers. "That reckless driver almost killed me. I was documenting everything for evidence." Viewers watched in real time as red and blue lights flashed through her living room windows. There was a knock at the door. Karen opened it confidently, phone raised. "Yes, officers." Within minutes, her tone changed. She was placed in handcuffs on suspicion of reckless endangerment and intentional obstruction of traffic. Her livestream captured the exact moment confusion turned into panic. "What do you mean I'm being arrested?" she demanded. He broke the bridge, but police weren't finished. Across town, officers also arrived at Daniel Ruiz's apartment. Unlike Karen, he wasn't streaming. He had already reported the incident to his employer and filed a safety statement. Still, he too was taken into custody pending investigation. The public exploded. How could both be responsible? Early reports suggested the sudden braking incident caused a dynamic load shift inside the cement truck. When 40,000 pounds of wet concrete lurched forward, it created a concentrated force far greater than its steady rolling weight. Engineers explained it simply. Bridges are designed for distributed weight, not violent shock loads. Karen's sudden brake check may have triggered exactly that. But investigators weren't ruling out other possibilities. Maintenance records revealed the bridge had minor structural warnings flagged 2 years prior. Budget delays postponed repairs. Could the structure have already been compromised? Meanwhile, Karen's viral video spread across every platform. Clips showed her shouting, swerving, and stepping out of her vehicle mid-bridge. The narrative online split instantly. Some called her reckless. Others blamed city infrastructure. Daniel's company released a short statement. Our driver complied with all posted weight limits and safety regulations. Still, questions remained. Why did Karen cut off the truck? Why was she filming before anything happened? And why did the bridge fail at that exact moment? By midnight, both suspects sat in separate holding rooms, unaware that forensic engineers were already uncovering evidence that would change everything. Because the truth wasn't just about anger. It was about intent, and someone's past behavior was about to resurface in a way no one expected. At 2:13 a.m., while Karen and Daniel sat in separate holding cells, a junior forensic analyst named Priya Malhotra replayed the footage for the 18th time. Everyone had seen Karen's livestream, but almost no one had noticed what happened 10 seconds before the brake check. The original viral clip started with Karen shouting at the truck. It showed her swerving. It showed the sudden stop. It showed the crack. What it didn't clearly show was the subtle movement of her SUV moments earlier. Priya slowed the frame rate to 1/4 speed. There, a quick glance into her rearview mirror. Then her eyes down toward her phone screen. Then, a smile. It lasted less than half a second. But it wasn't fear. It wasn't frustration. It looked like anticipation. Priya flagged the timestamp and called her supervisor. Meanwhile, structural engineers continued analyzing data from sensors embedded in the Riverside Bridge. Though outdated, the bridge had basic vibration monitors installed after a minor inspection report 3 years ago. The readings were shocking. The structure had been stable during normal traffic that morning, even under heavier vehicles than Daniel's cement truck. The stress levels only spiked dramatically at the exact second of the sudden stop. Not gradual pressure, not accumulated strain, a spike, a violent jolt. Investigators recreated the scenario using load simulation software. Results showed that if a fully loaded cement truck traveling at low speed is forced into an abrupt stop, the internal shift of wet concrete could amplify forward force by nearly 3 times the static load. But here's what disturbed them most. The simulation suggested that someone familiar with heavy vehicles could predict that outcome. Back in her holding cell, Karen requested a lawyer. In Daniel's interview room, detectives asked him a quiet but important question. Has anyone ever confronted you like this before? He hesitated. Then he nodded. 2 months earlier, another driver had accused Karen of brake checking on a highway during a road dispute. No charges were filed, but a complaint existed. Police pulled traffic citations, 3 warnings for aggressive driving, 1 dismissed complaint for intentional obstruction. The pattern was forming. At 4:26 a.m., Priya's enhanced footage finished processing. It revealed something even clearer. Right before Karen swerved, she adjusted her phone camera angle, as if preparing for a dramatic moment. Not reacting, preparing. Investigators exchanged looks. If proven intentional, this wasn't reckless behavior. It was calculated, and if she understood the risks of forcing a heavy truck to stop suddenly on aging infrastructure, the charges could escalate far beyond traffic violations. Because now, the question wasn't whether Karen caused the bridge to crack. The question was whether she meant to. Do you want to continue to Chapter 4? By sunrise, Riverside Bridge had transformed from a traffic disaster into a forensic laboratory. Structural engineers from the State Transportation Department arrived with scanning equipment, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. Every inch of fractured concrete was mapped. Every exposed steel bar was photographed. The crack itself stretched nearly 18 feet along the deck surface, spidering outward from the point where Daniel's cement truck had come to a violent stop. Chief Engineer Marcus Hale stood silently at the center of the damage zone. This wasn't gradual failure, he finally said. This was impact amplification. His words carried weight. Preliminary findings showed that while the bridge had minor aging concerns, its load-bearing beams remained within operational tolerance. In simpler terms, it was old, but it wasn't about to collapse on its own. The sudden braking event changed that. When 40,000 pounds of liquid concrete surged forward inside the rotating drum, it created a forward momentum force far exceeding normal distributed weight. The truck's front axle absorbed the first shock. The remaining force transferred directly into the bridge deck beneath it. It was like striking concrete with a hammer made of momentum. But there was another complication. Investigators recovered Karen's vehicle data recorder. Modern SUVs automatically log speed, brake pressure, and acceleration. The numbers told a precise story. Karen accelerated aggressively to overtake the truck. Then she applied maximum brake pressure within less than 2 seconds. No hazard, no obstacle, no pedestrian, just an intentional hard stop. Daniel's truck, traveling legally and within posted weight limits, had no safe stopping distance. Marcus Hale reviewed the synchronized data from both vehicles and the bridge sensors. The trigger event, he concluded, was the abrupt forced stop. Police updated the district attorney's office immediately. Reckless endangerment was no longer the only concern. Prosecutors began reviewing statutes related to criminal negligence and infrastructure sabotage. If intent could be demonstrated, penalties would escalate dramatically. Meanwhile, Daniel's employer released additional telemetry confirming the truck's compliance with all regulations. Brake systems functioned properly. Load weight fell under the maximum permitted limit. Public opinion began shifting. Karen's earlier confidence faded during her morning interrogation. When confronted with vehicle data, she claimed she felt threatened and acted defensively. But the footage contradicted that claim. There was no tailgating, no aggressive swerving from Daniel, only steady driving, and then her maneuver. At noon, prosecutors filed formal charges against Karen pending further investigation. Daniel, though still technically detained, was moved to witness status while authorities verified company safety compliance. The bridge remained closed indefinitely. Repair estimates climbed into the millions. And investigators prepared to answer the final, crucial question. Was this a moment of rage? Or a staged confrontation that went catastrophically wrong? Do you want to continue to Chapter 5? By the third day, the story had evolved from traffic chaos to something far more unsettling. Investigators began digging into Karen's online presence, not just the viral livestream from the bridge, but her history. What they found shifted the case in a disturbing direction. Karen wasn't just someone who liked to film confrontations. She built an audience around them. Her social media channels featured dozens of heated encounters: store managers, parking disputes, neighborhood arguments. Each video followed a pattern. She would narrate confidently, escalate quickly, and position herself as the victim exposing injustice. The videos generated attention. Attention generated followers. Followers generated money, ad revenue, donations, sponsorship offers, and recently, declining engagement. Analytics pulled through a subpoena revealed something critical. Her views had dropped nearly 40% in the past 3 months. Comments complained that her content felt repetitive, predictable. She needed something bigger, something dramatic. On the morning of the bridge incident, Karen posted a cryptic message: "Some people shouldn't be allowed on public roads. Today I'm exposing one." Investigators timestamped it. It was posted 12 minutes before she encountered Daniel's cement truck. Phone records revealed another detail. She had searched the phrase, "heavy truck sudden stop damage," 2 weeks earlier. Then again 3 days before the incident. During questioning, Karen claimed it was unrelated research for a road safety awareness series. But prosecutors saw it differently. Meanwhile, Daniel was released without charges after compliance verification cleared him of wrongdoing. Outside the precinct, he spoke briefly to reporters. "I was just doing my job," he said quietly. "I never expected any of this." Back at the district attorney's office, charges against Karen escalated. In addition to reckless endangerment, she now faced allegations of intentional property damage and criminal negligence resulting in infrastructure destruction. Repair costs were estimated at $8.4 million. Traffic detours were causing citywide delays, costing local businesses thousands daily. The bridge wasn't just concrete and steel. It was an artery, and it had been ruptured. Forensic accountants calculated potential financial motive. A single viral video reaching national news could generate more revenue in weeks than months of ordinary uploads. The timing, the searches, the brake data, the smile before the stop. Each piece alone raised suspicion. Together, they suggested something calculated. But prosecutors still needed one final element to solidify intent: proof that Karen understood the potential consequences of forcing a loaded truck to brake violently. And that proof was about to surface from an unexpected source. Because someone close to Karen had been watching her plan unfold long before the bridge ever cracked. The breakthrough came from someone no one expected. On the 4th evening after the bridge collapse, a woman walked quietly into the district attorney's office. She wasn't a city official. She wasn't an engineer. She was Karen's former friend. Her name was Melissa Grant, and she carried screenshots. I didn't think she would actually do it, Melissa said, sliding a printed message thread across the table. I thought she was just venting. The messages were dated 10 days before the incident. In them, Karen complained about declining engagement and algorithms burying her content. She wrote about needing something big enough to trend nationally. Then came a chilling line. What if I catch one of those overloaded cement trucks messing up infrastructure? That would blow up. Melissa told investigators she laughed at the time. She assumed it was exaggeration, dramatic talk fueled by frustration. But Karen continued in the messages. I've been reading about how sudden force from heavy trucks can damage weak bridges. It's crazy how fragile they are if you hit them right. Investigators compared the wording to Karen's online search history. The language matched. Melissa also revealed that Karen had started driving near construction routes intentionally, hoping to encounter large commercial vehicles for content. She said truck drivers make easy villains, Melissa admitted. The district attorney immediately moved to secure a formal affidavit. Meanwhile, Karen's defense attorney shifted strategy. Instead of arguing self-defense, he now claimed the messages were taken out of context. Creative brainstorming, nothing more. But prosecutors saw pattern reinforcement. Search history, vehicle telemetry, livestream positioning, pre-incident social media post. And now, private messages suggesting knowledge of structural vulnerability. Engineers confirmed that while most bridges are resilient, sudden dynamic loading can accelerate failure, particularly on aging surfaces with minor pre-existing cracks. The Riverside Bridge had such cracks. Not enough to cause collapse on their own, but enough to weaken resistance against shock force. Melissa's testimony provided what prosecutors needed: awareness. Karen may not have intended to cause millions in damage specifically, but evidence suggested she understood the risk of provoking a dangerous event. And she did it anyway. Public reaction shifted dramatically once the affidavit leaked to the press. Support dwindled, sponsors withdrew, followers dropped. Daniel, watching the news from home, finally understood why the confrontation had felt so deliberate. He hadn't been the target of anger. He had been part of a plan. On the 7th day, the district attorney announced formal felony charges would proceed to grand jury review. Karen remained in custody, and the bridge remained closed, a silent monument to a moment engineered for attention. But one question lingered in the courtroom hallways. Would a jury believe this was intentional sabotage, or reckless ambition spiraling out of control? The courthouse steps were packed before sunrise. News cameras lined the sidewalks. Commentators speculated nonstop. The phrase, "bridge sabotage case," scrolled across national headlines. What began as a viral traffic confrontation had evolved into one of the most unusual criminal cases the city had ever seen. Inside, 12 grand jurors reviewed days of evidence. Vehicle telemetry, bridge sensor data, search histories, private messages, livestream footage, expert engineering analysis. Prosecutors presented the timeline with surgical precision. Karen's declining engagement, her research into heavy truck force dynamics, her deliberate maneuver, the maximum brake pressure reading, the exact millisecond when bridge stress sensors spiked. They didn't need to prove she wanted the bridge destroyed. They needed to prove she knowingly created a dangerous situation for personal gain. The defense countered aggressively. They argued that researching infrastructure doesn't equal intent to damage it. That venting to a friend isn't a confession. That brake checking, while reckless, is common road rage, not calculated sabotage. They emphasized the bridge's age and maintenance delays. They reminded jurors that structural cracks predated the incident. This was an accident amplified by fragile infrastructure, the defense insisted. Not a criminal mastermind. But then prosecutors showed the enhanced footage again. Frame by frame, the mirror glance, the camera angle adjustment, the faint smile. Jurors watched in silence. Next came expert testimony explaining dynamic load transfer, how liquid concrete shifting forward multiplies impact force. The engineer's simulation replayed on screen, showing how the abrupt stop acted like a hammer strike against weakened concrete. Finally, Melissa Grant testified privately before the jury. She repeated Karen's words, "if you hit them right." 3 hours later, the jurors filed back into the courtroom. The foreperson stood, a true Bill. Felony charges would proceed to trial. Outside, the announcement triggered immediate reaction. Some cheered accountability. Others worried about precedent. Could reckless driving now be framed as infrastructure sabotage? Karen was escorted back to holding without expression. Daniel, watching the broadcast from his living room, exhaled for what felt like the first time in a week. The trial date was set for 3 months later. Meanwhile, demolition crews began removing the damaged section of Riverside Bridge. Engineers determined repairs would take at least 8 months. Traffic rerouting continued. Businesses suffered. City officials debated budget allocations. The cost of one abrupt stop continued spreading outward like cracks in concrete. As Karen's legal team prepared for trial, prosecutors uncovered one more piece of digital evidence, a deleted draft video script saved on her laptop. Its title sent chills through the investigative team. Exposing the system. When infrastructure fails. And it had been written the night before the bridge cracked. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the shuffle of paper. Karen sat at the defense table in a navy blazer, her once confident posture replaced by rigid stillness. Across the aisle, prosecutors arranged digital screens that would replay the moment the bridge cracked again and again before the jury. Opening statements began. "This case is about choices," the prosecutor said. "Not accidents. Not bad luck. Choices driven by profit and attention." The defense stood moments later. "This case is about overreach," her attorney replied. "My client is guilty of poor judgment, perhaps even reckless driving, but not calculated destruction." The prosecution called their first witness, Chief Engineer Marcus Hale. He walked jurors through diagrams of the Riverside Bridge, explaining pre-existing hairline fractures and how sudden dynamic force amplified structural stress. On screen, simulation footage showed the truck's load surging forward during the break event. The animation froze at the precise second the bridge sensors recorded a spike. "It was the trigger," Hale said firmly. Next came digital forensics. An analyst displayed Karen's search history, time-stamped and authenticated. Queries about heavy truck braking force. Articles about structural vulnerabilities. The deleted draft script recovered from her laptop, written hours before the incident. The jury leaned forward. Then the most powerful evidence returned to the screen, the enhanced video footage. The mirror glance. The camera adjustment. The faint anticipatory smile. Frame by frame. The defense objected repeatedly, arguing interpretation bias. But the judge allowed it. When Melissa Grant took the stand, emotion filled the room. She described their friendship, the frustration, the messages, the line that now echoed across headlines, "If you hit them right." Under cross-examination, the defense tried to paint Melissa as resentful and seeking attention. She held firm. "I came forward because I realized someone could have died," she said quietly. Daniel Ruiz testified last. He spoke calmly about company safety rules, about feeling the violent jolt when the truck stopped, about watching concrete dust rise in his mirrors. "I thought the bridge was collapsing under me," he said. "I was scared for everyone." Closing arguments lasted nearly 4 hours. The prosecution emphasized knowledge and intent to create a dangerous event for gain. The defense urged jurors not to criminalize speculation and online bravado. After 2 weeks of testimony, the judge gave final instructions. The jury would decide whether Karen's actions crossed the line from reckless driving into felony criminal negligence and intentional infrastructure damage. Deliberations began. Outside, crowds gathered once more on the courthouse steps. Inside the jury room, 12 strangers now carried the weight of a broken bridge, and a decision that could redefine accountability in the digital age. The verdict would arrive by morning. At 9:12 a.m., the jury returned. No one spoke as they filed into their seats. Karen stared straight ahead, hands clasped tightly together. Daniel sat quietly in the second row behind the prosecution table. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready. The clerk stood. In the matter of the state versus Karen Mitchell, the courtroom felt weightless. On the charge of felony criminal negligence resulting in infrastructure destruction, we find the defendant guilty. A sharp breath escaped somewhere in the gallery. On the charge of intentional obstruction and reckless endangerment, guilty. Karen's shoulders dropped. Her attorney whispered urgently, already preparing for sentencing arguments. Outside, the news alert flashed across phones within seconds. Guilty. The judge ordered Karen remanded into custody pending sentencing. Prosecutors requested restitution for repair costs totaling $8.4 million, along with prison time under state felony guidelines. In his sentencing remarks weeks later, the judge addressed the broader impact. This court recognizes that social media influence does not exempt anyone from responsibility. When online performance intersects with public safety, the consequences are real. Karen received a multi-year prison sentence, reduced slightly for lack of prior felony history, but severe enough to send a clear message. Civil lawsuits followed. Sponsors filed breach of contract claims. The city pursued financial restitution. Her channels went dark. Meanwhile, Riverside Bridge reconstruction progressed steadily. Engineers reinforced the new deck with upgraded materials designed to better withstand dynamic loading events. 8 months after the crack that shook the city, traffic finally flowed again. On reopening day, Daniel Ruiz drove across first, not for publicity, but because his delivery route required it. He crossed slowly, hands steady on the wheel, the rebuilt concrete solid beneath him. There were no cameras this time. No shouting, no sudden brakes, just ordinary movement over reinforced ground. The case sparked nationwide debate about digital accountability. Legal scholars cited it in discussions about intent in the age of monetized outrage. Cities reviewed infrastructure protection laws. Insurance policies were rewritten. The bridge became more than repaired concrete. It became a reminder that actions performed for an audience can ripple far beyond a screen. That recklessness amplified by ambition can fracture more than steel and stone.
And that's something the loudest crack isn't the sound of crack breaking, it's the movement a choice shutters everything that follows. The Riverside Bridge stands today stronger than before, but its story remains a warning covered in its foundation, and it all began with one sudden stop. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.